Upside Down in the Middle of Nowhere. This was chapters 18 and 19. Shadows danced and shifted from one wall to the other, and it scared and confused me. It took me a minute or two of looking around to remember that we were in the attic and why we were there. Celie and Georgie played with a flashlight, making finger shadows on the dirty plywood floor and vibrating walls. My neck was stiff and I needed to stretch, but Mima's heavy old head was lying on top of mine. I tried to get out from under her without waking her up. I got frustrated. Mima, I whispered, nudging her with my trapped arm, and she didn't move. Mima, I whispered again, but louder. She still didn't move. I patted her cheek real quick and jerked my hand away. Something was wrong. Her skin didn't feel normal, and I touched her cheek again instead of feeling her usually silky, soft skin. It felt like I was touching the outside of a chilled watermelon. My breathing came faster and harder. I didn't care if I interrupted her sleep or not. I pulled my hat out from under her weight of hers, and her head flopped down, and her chin rested on her chest at an unnatural angle. I jumped to my feet, and my heart raced, and panic spread from my toes. My mouth went dry, and I couldn't swallow. Mima, I said, poking her shoulder with my finger. She still wouldn't wake up. My whole body took to shaking from inside out. I didn't see Daddy come from beside me, and I felt him there. Mama was sobbing. I just stood there, and I didn't move. I didn't cry, and I couldn't breathe, and I just stood there. Georgie paced back and forth with Cricket pushed against his chest, punching jabs at the empty air in front of him. The wind was blowing fierce, howling and screaming, and something crashed down into the roof. Celia was crying louder than anyone, and the twins fussed and wanted to be picked up, and Mama was down on her knees, and Daddy hovered over her with all his head slouched down. Do something, Daddy, I shouted in a voice that didn't sound like me. It's too late, Armani, she's gone, Daddy said through his own tears. What are you saying? I shook so hard my teeth chattered. Save her, like you did with Colleen. Daddy still didn't move. He just fussed over useless Mama. The house shifted under my feet, and the world rattled and whooshed. Why wouldn't he at least try to save her? I all but pushed Mama out of the way, and I grabbed hold of Mima's shoulder so I could lay down and try to do CPR like I seen Daddy do for Colleen. But she was heavy and wouldn't move, and sweat poured off of me, and I was shaking and clumsy, and I needed to hurry. Daddy tried to wrap his arms around me, and I wriggled free, never taking my eyes off Mima. Daddy put himself between me and Mima, and I swung him and landed a good one somewhere in the middle of his belly. Leave me alone, I screamed at him. Someone's got to save her. I just kept trying to move her. Armani, please stop, Daddy said, wiping his tears away with the bottom of his shirt. It's too late, baby. She's gone. No, she's not. Stop saying that. I couldn't catch my breath. I tried again to move her, and this time was a big heave, but Mima's lifeless body fell sideways to where she looked like she was kissing her own kneecap, and everyone gasped, and Celie cried louder. Mama came to me and she stood beside me, barely placing her hand on my shoulder. Mima's with Jesus, Armani, she said, with tears streaming down her face. Everything was blurry through my own tears that wouldn't fall, and my head throbbed. Mama gave my shoulder a little squeeze, and she walked away and went over to Celie, who fell in her arms like a rag doll. Daddy was over in the corner trying to get Georgie to stand still, and I took Mama's hand into mine, and I kissed the top of it where it was extra soft. I pressed her hand to my cheek and felt a tear roll across her hand. I love you, Mima, I said, sucking in hot, thick air. I looked down at her crumpled body, and my tears started flowing. Without saying a word, Daddy came over and scooped up Mima like she didn't weigh no more than Celie. He carried her to the far side of the attic and laid her down careful not to let her head bump on the floor. I crawled over and sat beside Mima, losing control of my crying, and I came in long and loud sobs. Daddy kneeled down and put his arm around me. I know, baby, I know, he said softly near my ear. My head started to fall towards his shoulder, and his arm went around me tighter. It's going to be all right, Nene. A bolt stabbed into my heart, and I pushed him away, all but knocking him to the floor. I jumped up trembling and glared at him. Shut up, don't ever call me that. He stared at me, his mouth half open, his eyes all puffy and wet, and after a few solid stomps in the clunky boots, I stood over my mama. I whipped around and gave him a serious head slide, and my eyes burning and glazed over, and from the bottom of where all my meanness is stored, I said in a slow, low, even tone, no one calls me that but Mima. We locked eyes for only a second, till Daddy slowly turned away with his head hanging down. Tears streamed down my face as I watched Daddy bend down to kiss Mima on her forehead, then he unbuttoned his thin old shirt, and he took it off and covered my Mima. All the air and happy and knowing and everything got pulled out of me and left me standing there with big wobbly legs. I threw myself into Mama's arms and cried till I had no more tears left inside me, and Daddy was holding Georgie the way Mama was holding me. We stayed like that till the tree broke through the roof and landed in the middle of our attic, separating me from Mima. My brothers and sisters were all screaming and crying, and I could see it on their faces but didn't hear anything. I looked up through the huge hole in the roof, and the black of the night fell onto me and looked in. I closed my eyes, and there was finally going to be enough air to breathe. Chapter 19. This is on Tuesday, August 30th at 2005 at 4:23 in the morning. The night was close to over by the time Daddy found a safe way for us to climb out of the hole into the roof, hole in the roof that the tree had made. When Mama and the kids started making their way through the hole, my brain and heart got into a scuffle. Surviving the nightmare meant getting out of the attic, but I didn't want to leave Mom behind. She didn't like being by herself and always making sure one of us was close by for company. How could we just up and leave her so alone? Me and Daddy were the last ones left in the attic, and I wanted to tell him, but it was wrong to leave Ma, and then I was sorry for being hateful, but I wasn't ready to talk to him just yet. And I kept quiet, letting myself be pushed through the jagged hole onto the roof. The sky was midnight blue, and my tiny white stars blinking everywhere. I took a deep breath and sucked in a huge gulp of the fresh night air. It was the first real breath I'd taken since Mima had died. A new batch of tears filled my eyes, and I squeezed the compass locket between my hands. I tore my eyes from the star-filled sky and seen the silhouette of Mama keeping watch over her babies. They were sleeping at her feet, and she was holding herself and swaying from side to side. She stared up at the sky, the moonlight shining off the curves of her face, and Mama had lost her Mama. I took in another long breath of the sweet nighttime air. It was like the house knew we were going to be needing to come stay on the roof, so it turned itself just so giving us a shiny, almost flat spot to be on. Even still, I was nervous walking in the dark on the slippery roof, shuffling along in the bulky rubber boots. Mama never took her eyes off heaven. I slipped my hand into hers, and she squeezed it with all her might, and I leaned into her and cried. The starlight caught a hold of a tear sliding down her cheek, and we stood there for a long time, letting the sadness take over while heaven looked on. "No way!" Georgie shouted. His voice cut through the night air. "Daddy, look at this." "Not again." Georgie was shining the flashlight back and forth in front of him, looking at something over the side of the roof. The sound of sloshing, dogs barking, people hollering, cricket whining, the noise filled my head all at once. I inched closer to see what was fussing about. "We floated out in the middle of the Gulf, Daddy." Georgie had Cricket up under his arm. I didn't care. My arms are too heavy for holding. "Armani," Mama said, touching my arm, "stay here with the twins. Don't let them move." I nodded, and Mama baby stepped her way under the shaky legs over to Daddy. He held her tight when she stared over the side, and I held my breath, wondering what it was that she might have been seeing down there. Her hand flew up to her mouth, and she buried her head in the Daddy's shoulder. "What's going on?" Celia asked. "I don't know," I answered. Daddy walked Mama all careful like back to over where I was with the little ones. Mama looked at me with mournful eyes. "There's water everywhere," she said in a heavy, tired voice, and she fell into my arms, and the weight of her sadness was on me. Daddy cupped the side of my face in his big, shaky hand, and I wanted to hug him more than ever, and for him to hug me back, but I couldn't look at him. I didn't want to see the wanting in my eyes, and I turned my eyes away and found a star to stare at. "You shouldn't make promises you can't keep," I said, and Daddy's hand slowly fell away from my face. Mom went to crying softly again. Daddy picked up Kayla and dragged himself back over near the edge of the roof and sat down. Georgie and Sally sat on the other side of him. Georgie's glasses kept sliding off his sweaty nose, so Celia stuck them down inside her book sack since he couldn't hold on to them, and the puppy too. Cricket looked snug and safe up on my brother's lap. Somewhere close by, something loud splashed into the water. Somewhere close by, someone screamed. Chill bumps ran down my back. "Where'd all the water come from, Daddy?" Celia asked, with her head resting on Daddy's arm. Colleen was fussing, and Kayla whined nonstop about being hungry, and I did my best to help poor Mama keep them settled, but mostly I concentrated on my ears and whatever Daddy was fixing to say. "Well, the levees must have breached and flooded the city. For years people have been saying this could happen. I just never imagined." "So what's going to happen to us?" Georgie asked. Him and Daddy looked so much alike in the shine of the moon, both of them without their glasses. "How are we going to get down from here, Daddy?" "I don't know, son. I don't know," he said. Cricket was harder to handle than Kayla and Colleen put together. None of us wanted to let her walk around on account of us being up on a rooftop and all, but she couldn't handle being held another minute. Daddy told Georgie to let Cricket loose so she can move a little, but watch her close. Georgie set the puppy down, and right away Cricket went to sniffing, walking with her little nose stuck to the rooftop. It wasn't like Hurricane Katrina had blown any good sense in for Georgie, so I kept a close eye on the situation. When the twins weren't sleeping, they were fussing, and poor Mama had her hands full trying to soothe them with nothing more than the sweetness of her voice. Celia took to mothering Kyla, and I hadn't seen Celia with a book of any kind in a good while. Maybe she was feeling maybe she was feeling about reading and writing the way I was feeling about talking and helping. I watched the stars disappear as the sky turned softer blue with a promise of light right behind it. Daddy's been sitting over himself for a long while, tugged on my heart to go and talk to him. I needed to know that I was sorry, him to know that I was sorry and still loved him. I stood up, fixing to go make an apology, when Cricket went to spin, and she was spinning and yapping and chasing the stub of a tail connected to her backside, and Colleen started to giggle. Georgie walked in circles around the puppy and started laughing too. Be careful, son, Daddy warned. I will, Daddy. Even though it was a relief to hear something beside the constant sound of the water rushing and the far-off shouts of echoing in the early morning, it still seemed wrong that anyone could laugh with Meemaw just lying dead right up under us. Like someone flipped a switch and the sun showed itself, pouring a creepy, beautiful orangey glow over everything. I didn't have to go look over the edge of the roof no more to see the water. It was everywhere, just like Mama said. Water for miles and miles, and the sun was reflecting off the gasoline-smelling water, made it look like we were surrounded by liquid fire. It felt like the end of the world. I clomped in Meemaw's boots, heading over to Daddy, and no matter what, I needed him to know that I was sorry, but I never made it that far.